Hi, guys, and we are live with Carmen DeFalco from the Carmen, Yurko, and Harry Show on ESPN 1000. Hey, Carmen, how are you?
I'm well, Chris. How are you?
I'm great, man. It's great to finally have you on the show. Been planning this for a while.
Glad to finally come on. Talk some Bulls.
Yeah, I guess we should start talking about the Bulls right now. Last night, the Bulls lost 79-74 against the Sixers in Philadelphia. The Bulls were out-rebounded 38-32 and were outscored in the paint 52-32. And as we know, the Bulls only lost by 5 points. We missed 8 free throws, shooting 10 for 18 from the line. Not a great night, Carmen. Not a great night. What were your thoughts on last night's game?
Well, it wasn't a great night. You're absolutely right. And I think it was, it sort of was the kind of night that I was worried about, or the kind of game I was worried about. Chris and Derek went down because they just don't have another go-to closer, another go-to scorer late in games. And, you know, the close games are the ones that I was really worried about. You know, Tuesday, I think, was a little bit more of an aberration in what happened in that game because they just played terribly and they got blown out. You know, that's not the way the Bulls are going to play very often. Last night was more indicative, even without Derek, that they're competitive, that they're going to be close. But my fear was that there's nobody that's going to come up with a big basket late. I think that's what we saw more than anything. They held the team in a playoff game on the road to less than 80 points, and they lost. So defensively, you did what you wanted to do, even though you didn't play great in the fourth. But they just have nobody without Derek that can really score in those tight late-game situations.
Which brings up another point. C.J. Watson played about 20 minutes and shot 0 for 4. What do you think about the whole point guard situation? Should we see, I think we should see Mike James on the floor. I believe he's the best defensive point guard we have, excluding Derrick Rose. What do you feel about this whole point guard situation, Carmen?
Well, you know, it's a good point about Mike James maybe getting a little extra time here. Just because
sometime.
Sometime. Good point. How about getting any time on the floor? It's not really working with CJ. CJ hasn't played well, unfortunately, here. I mean, even down the stretch of the regular season, I didn't think CJ played particularly well. And I don't know if some nagging injuries from earlier in the year caught up to him, Chris, or what. But you're right. He has almost looked, I don't know, in a way out of place, in a way maybe a little intimidated, which is surprising for a guy who's got a little experience, has been in the league for a while. I haven't liked the way he's played at all. Now, do you go to Mike James? The fear, I think, there is that it might reek of desperation by Tom Thibodeau. Now, at this point, he might not have any other choice, but how many coaches or how many teams are going to go to a guy that barely played in the NBA this season, played very sparingly and played very few minutes, all of a sudden inserting him into key moments in a playoff game? Now, maybe you say out of necessity you absolutely have to, desperate or not, just because you need something to get this team going a little bit because you lost your star point guard. But yeah, I'm not a huge fan of John Lucas. That sometimes is not a popular opinion amongst Bulls fans. I think they fall in love with his three-point shooting ability and some of the good games he's had, but more than anything, he stalls the offense to me. So I'm not a huge fan of his. I do think he should probably be playing a little bit more than CJ at this point, though, just because CJ has played, I think, almost borderline terribly. And maybe you go to Mike James and get him on the floor a little bit now, especially, like you said, some of those key defensive matchups that you might want to take advantage of.
Yeah, and, you know, you brought up earlier that C.J. Watson, he pretty much almost looks intimidated, and, you know, I definitely have to agree with you, and it is a little odd seeing that from a guy who has experience in the NBA. Not necessarily that he has experience in the playoffs, because I believe last season was his first time in the playoffs with the Bulls.
Right.
And, you know, I'm definitely surprised at what we're seeing from Watson. He played pretty well throughout the regular season, but as many people thought, the playoffs were going to be a whole different story. And Carmen, the Bulls are down in this series 2-1. Have you any time this season? I know we battled through injuries a lot. Did you think we were going to be able to say that the Bulls are losing to Philadelphia in the series 2-1?
Well, I mean, who knew that Derek would get hurt the way he did, even though he battled all those injuries? I mean, to have him go down in the first game the way he did obviously changes the outlook of the postseason for the Bulls. I mean, it really does. Now, with that said, Chris, I still thought that they would win this series against Philly. I thought it after he went down. I thought that their size, their depth would probably be able to wear out Philly with the home court. Unfortunately, doubt has certainly crept in, and I think what's so dangerous now after losing last night is that doubt has really crept into the players' minds. The way they've lost these last two games, one in blowout fashion, one in close game fashion where they couldn't buy a basket and they couldn't get anybody offensively to make a big shot, to get to the free throw line, to accomplish something late in that game. I think doubt has crept in at this point. Losing the home court, obviously, when you lost Tuesday night, is pretty bad. So there's no question that I think a lot of us are feeling like this playoff run might end really quickly because Derek went down. And if they lose tomorrow, I think you can pretty much forget about it. But last night, to me, is a devastating loss just because I think it does allow doubt to creep into the players' minds at this point.
Yeah, there's something that has to, there's something that has to motivate these players, if you ask me, from now on. I don't even think they thought they were going to be losing against the number 8 seed in the Eastern Conference. Even though it's only by one game, I don't think they've seen this coming. And here's a question that I've been asked. I've asked this question around to many other people. And now, of course, the All-Star game was a few months ago, but do you believe Luol Deng deserves that All-Star spot he received?
Well, I don't know, because it's hard to look back. I mean, I think that it is warranted and it is deserved. But the one thing people should probably remember is that it's just something, okay, so he's an all-star. We attach that to his name. What does that really mean? I mean, do we change our outlook, or has anyone really that's watched the Bulls or Luol play the last couple years changed their outlook of Luol Deng because he is a quote-unquote all-star this year? To me, it doesn't one bit. The best thing that's happened to Luol Deng's career has been the arrival of Derrick Rose because it's taken a lot of pressure off him. It's allowed him to flourish in kind of a secondary role. He's not a star player. You want to put an all-star on his name, he went to an all-star game, fine. He is not a star player. He is not a top 20, 25 player in the NBA. And I think people expect now probably too much out of him because we attach that all-star tag to him. Did he deserve it this year? He's a valued member and specifically he's a valued defensive member on a very good defensive team that had the best record in the league for the second straight year. I don't have much of a problem with sending him to the All-Star game, but people shouldn't get caught up in that, meaning that all of a sudden, well, now that Luol Deng's an All-Star, that means he's going to be a different player. He won't be, and he's still not a guy offensively that is ever going to be able to carry a team. And now they almost look to that, I think, a little bit because Derek is out. Rick had a bad shooting game last night, and Carlos Boozer had some ups and downs in the game. So people then turn to Luol Deng and go, okay, well, it's time for Luol to take over the game, but he's really not capable of doing that. Certainly he's not capable of doing it in a playoff series over 7 games where you need 4 wins to advance.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I'm not going to lie. I was one of those people who I thought, okay, because this was really the first year that I actually pretty much paid attention to Luol Deng, and I thought, okay, we have another all-star on this team, quote-unquote. He should be a superstar once D Rose is taken out and stuff. I definitely expected his off to definitely blow up because earlier in the season he was playing pretty well on the offensive side. And
but he plays well. Remember how much better and how much easier the game is for him when Derek's on the floor. I think that's the big difference. And with Derek out, it reverts back to what the Bulls were hoping they'd have a few years back with Luol Deng before Derek's arrival, or maybe even in Derek's rookie season before he turned into the star player that we know him today. And we still see that same Luol Deng. He's the beneficiary of playing with Derek offensively. I won't take anything away from Luol and how hard he works. He's worked hard at his game over the years. He's a very good defensive player. But offensively, there are just things in his game where he is challenged. And he can't really dominate one-on-one situations. He's not a great three-point shooter. Worked on becoming a better three-point shooter over his career. And all those things are good. And they add value to a team when you are a secondary player. But when he has to be something more than that offensively is where I think people get people kind of see that old Luol, and then it frustrates them now because he makes a lot of money and he's been in an All-Star game, but it doesn't change who he is as an offensive player. And I think part of what's going on with Luol, too, and he really had a poor offensive game. He barely even, I don't know, what did he take, 7 shots last night? Does that sound right? Did he have about 7? I don't even know what he had. He didn't get involved in the offense much. I think his wrist is really bothering him, too, so.
You know, that's the next point I was going to bring up. That torn ligament in his wrist. You know, honestly, I'm not trying to be hard on Luol, but I think if he says he's good enough to play, then I think we should expect a little bit more from him. What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, yeah, look, Kobe's played with it all year. Kobe was the second leading. I mean, I don't know how similar those injuries are, or if they're exact, I guess I should say, but Kobe's had a ligament issue in his wrist since going back to right when the truncated season started, right when the truncated training camp started, and he hurt that wrist before they even played a game. He played with it all year as the second leading scorer in the league. So, and obviously they've always said, and people in the NBA have said, Kobe's probably got maybe the highest threshold of pain tolerance out of any player in the NBA. So maybe it's why he's been able to thrive a little bit more, but I don't want to compare Kobe to Luol anyway. That's, Luol's obviously not Kobe Bryant. So I don't know how much it's affecting him. I think there's definitely something to it. I think it's probably, it's certainly made teams, it's made him, how do I put this? He's easier. It's easier for teams to come up with a game plan to defend him, I think, right now, especially with Derek being out. And teams can really try to force him left, try to put extra strain, extra pressure on that left hand, try to make him use a left-handed dribble. I mean, teams obviously know. They see it. They know what the weakness is right now in that wrist. They know with Derek being out, they can key on him probably a little bit more. And I think he's been completely taken out of this series defensively by Doug Collins and the Sixers. And I think it's a little bit, for them, it's a little bit easier to predict exactly how they're going to take away his offensive game because of the injury and the absence of Derek.
Yeah, and last night, Luol Deng played 37 minutes, shot 2 for 7, 5 points, 9 rebounds. Yeah. And, 9 rebounds, that's great if you ask me.
Sure.
But that 5 points, you cannot expect that shooting 2 for 7 as a starter. Right. I don't know. That's even tough to kind of look at, saying Luol Deng shot 2 for 7, having 5 points in a playoff game.
Barely part of the offense, and again, I think the Sixers have keyed in on something for sure, and and then they fed Boozer obviously a little. Boozer kind of got it going early, disappeared then unfortunately, kind of got it going a little bit late again. So I understand that they were making a more concerted effort to get the ball to Boozer and let him do some of the heavy lifting, and he did early. But yeah, that just goes to show you that the 2 for 7 is all you need to know about how Philly's decided to try to take him and that offensive option away from the Bulls, how they've keyed in on Luol in these last couple of games.
Right, and now on a different topic of last night's game, how about Joakim Noah injuring that left ankle? Left the arena last night with an air cast and crutches. Honestly, it seems like I heard Casey Johnson from the Chicago Tribune report that it's just a bad sprain. There's no fractures in his ankle, and he is doubtful for the rest of the series. And just seeing from that injury last night, I was very impressed with Noah just to come back in the game. Did I agree with the decision? No, I did not agree with it, but I was definitely impressed with Joakim Noah coming back in the game and showing that he wants to win.
Well, I'm with you on that. He's tough, and that was impressive. There's no way he should have been put back into that game. I don't know I'm not exactly sure what Tom Thibodeau and the Bulls were thinking there. There's just no way. But obviously the experiment didn't even last long when they realized that he just wasn't going to be able to play. There's a horrific-looking sprain, and you're right, I guess no fractures. But the sprain, to sprain it that way, I mean, I can't imagine what his ankle's feeling like today and just how swollen it is and the damage that still is done in and around those muscles and those tendons with that sprain. I'd be shocked if he played, Chris. He certainly doesn't look like he's going to play in Game 4, and I'd be shocked if he... I guess I shouldn't say shocked. Let's see if the Bulls can stretch the series out to 7. We'll see. But I would be beyond shocked if he played tomorrow in Philly. That would be something if he did.
Yeah, I agree with you, Carmen. And how about the Sixers arena? It seemed like they were actually cheering.
Yeah,
thinking that Noah was hurt. That's just, I don't know, that's just terrible, and that just shows you what kind of fans the 76ers fans could be like.
Typical Philly fans, you know. Yeah, you're right. It's shameful. Low class, typical Philly fans. What else do you say about it? You just, you know, you try not to let it bother you, and you put it behind you and move on. But that was pretty weak by their fans cheering Joe King get hurt last night.
Yeah, and of course we almost had another scare with Taj Gibson. Another report, Casey Johnson reported that Taj Gibson, he usually overreacts with these injuries that don't seem like to be a big deal. Have you ever seen anything like that with Taj? I haven't really paid attention.
Yeah, you know, that's always been the thing. Like, he looks like he's more injured than he actually is, but Taj is tough too. So I'm not worried about Taj as much. It looked like that was just something that he had to kind of shake off. I'm sure it's bothering him today a little bit, but it looked like once he got up and down the floor a couple times, he was able to shake it off. He looked like he was fine. I thought Taj played very well actually last night. He's probably one of the stars of the game for the Bulls.
Yeah, as usual, he always comes off the bench with so much energy. Him and Joakim Noah, I think, are two pieces that we really need to advance if we are even going to advance to the next round. The Chicago Bulls play Game 4 in the series tomorrow at noon. Carmen, let's switch gears and talk some Chicago Bears.
All right.
NFL draft was just last week. Overall, what would you grade the Bears in the draft?
I thought it was about average. I like what they did at the top. I'm not so sure, and I'm not going to pretend like I'm an expert of all these players. When you get into the deep round, the corners they took, you know, I know the kid from TCU probably more as a specialist and a return guy anyway for the Bears going forward. I like what they did up top. I still think there were some needs that they, for whatever reason, maybe they just didn't find value on the offensive line there. That they neglected that area to me, which I thought at some point they would address. So C+, B-, not too bad, but I do like Shea McClellan. I do like Alshon Jeffrey a lot. I mean, that's the one player that he's certainly polarizing. I mean, people have a lot of opinions on what went wrong with his junior season, why the dip in production, why the drastic weight gain. Then he lost a lot of it, but he was a very soft 216, as the scouts were putting it at the combine, because he basically just shed the muscle without really shed the fat, without putting muscle on. So I know there's been a lot of criticism of him, and I know there's some concern about his ability to just completely separate from NFL defenders at the line of scrimmage. But I like his size, I like his hands, I love what he did in his sophomore season at South Carolina, and I think it's great that the Bears have two. You know, you've got a 6'4" and a 6'3" receiver now. That will be a matchup nightmare for most teams in the NFL. I don't know that there is an NFL team that really is going to look at that and say, boy, we feel good about matching up with the size the Bears have with their top two receivers now.
Yeah, definitely going to be tough. And you know what? I actually gave the Bears a B-, really just because I thought that these two guys I gave the Bears a B- because I kind of thought they could have drafted an offensive lineman, but these two guys that we did draft, in McClellan and Jeffrey, just these two guys, and I haven't really I took a look at a few other of the draft picks. You know, they look good as well, but these two guys really stand out. They definitely look like they're ready to work, and they look like they're great additions to the Bears.
Well, they look like they're instant contributors, and that's key. You know, you want to hit home runs, obviously, with those high picks. You don't want to bust on those picks. It's hard when you do. So I think they found two needs, obviously, a pass rusher and a wide receiver, and two guys that they feel like are going to jump right in and contribute. Not long-term projects, not a Earl Bennett-type wide receiver that needed really a year kind of on the sidelines to learn the offense and to learn about playing in the NFL. I mean, I think both of these players are fully expected, and if they can do this, I think we'll look back and say it was a very good draft, and the Bears will have a good year because of it. If they can jump in and contribute right away, that'd be huge. But I certainly think that's what Phil Emery and the Bears believe, that they got two guys that are not going to be brought along slowly. They're going to be guys that play. Certainly Alshon Jeffrey.
Yeah, and speaking of Phil Emery, he definitely impressed many people, including myself, and it seems like you. What about this Matt Forte situation, Carmen? You think it's going to get done anytime soon, the deal?
I don't know. I mean, I want to believe that they'll eventually work something out with Matt. I'm also a huge proponent, though, of not overpaying running backs in the NFL. I'm not as down on the Bears as some for the way they've handled this. Matt Forte would have a handsome contract this year, making a little over $7.5 million on his franchise tag if he decides to sign it and play under it. I know he wants a long-term deal because he wants that guaranteed money. He wants a lot of guaranteed money because it's for the shelf life of a running back in this league is just very short, unfortunately, and he realizes the situation and he needs to try to hit the jackpot now. But it's there for a reason, Chris, that franchise tag. It's been collectively bargained in by the players and by the owners and the GMs and the teams in the NFL. I mean, it's there for a reason. It's there for teams to use. I think the Bears are doing the right thing. I'd like for them to be able to get a deal done for Matt and reward him for what he's meant to this team. But I totally agree with Phil Emery and the Bears. They've drawn a line in the sand, and they said, we're not overpaying. Because running backs in this day and age in the NFL, let's face it, they are a dime a dozen. It's a passing league. You can find running backs everywhere. I like Matt Forte, but I would not overpay for him.
All right, well, Mr. Carmen DeFalco, you're the Bears general manager for the season. What will the contract look like that you offer Matt Forte?
I'd do something along the lines of that Foster deal, and who else? Who else had the deal? Why am I blanking on who else got a deal in the offseason? Who was it, Chris?
Marshawn Lynch?
Yeah, the Lynch deal. Thank you. The Lynch. I'd do something along the lines of the Lynch-Foster deal. If you want to, if you can get somewhere around $18 or $20 million, I'd say that's a number you can live with. If you start getting above $25 million, if he's looking to make money over that and guarantees, I'd say don't do it. I don't think it's worth it. But if you get somewhere around $18 million, to me is a pretty good number, and I think it's rewarding Matt Forte for what he's done and what he can continue to do in the next couple of years. Now, I don't think Matt Forte's people feel quite the same way, but I think it's a pretty fair number if you get in somewhere around that Lynch and that Arian Foster deal.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Carmen. And you know what? Something's telling me that the Bears have offered him a deal, something like that. I just have a feeling, and unfortunately, I believe he has turned it down, maybe feeling like he's a better player than those guys. I don't know. It's just a weird feeling. But Carmen, I got to thank you, man. This show has been great. It was great to have you as a co-host for tonight, or this evening, I should say. And like I said, if it wasn't for you, really, I wouldn't have started this show. So thank you. If you have anything you'd like to plug here on air, please do.
No, not at all. I just appreciate the time. Good luck to you, Chris. You're working hard. You're doing good things. So keep it up, all right?
All right, thanks. And Carmen, Yurko, and Harry, the Afternoon Saloon, weekdays, 2 to 6 p.m.
That's right. You got it.
All right, Carmen, talk to you soon.
All right, Chris. See you, man.